On March 1st, 1932, in the quiet town of Hopewell, New Jersey, a stranger climbed a ladder to the second-floor nursery of the Lindbergh home and vanished into the night with a child. That child was Charles Lindbergh Jr., the 20-month-old son of one of the most famous men in the world. The Lindberghs were America's golden couple. Charles Lindbergh, the iconic aviator who conquered the Atlantic in 1927, was the nation's hero. His wife, Anne Morrow Lindbergh, was a talented writer and daughter of wealth. Together, they seemed to have it all: fame, success, and a picture-perfect family. But on the night of March 1st, 1932, that perfect life would be shattered forever. While Charles worked in his study and Anne remained nearby in the house, a stranger slipped into the night. A crude, homemade ladder was placed against the wall of the house, and someone climbed to the second-floor nursery. There, in the silence of the dark, the 20-month-old child, Charles Lindbergh Jr., was taken from his crib. Just 30 minutes earlier, the baby's nursemaid, Betty Gow, had checked on him. Everything seemed fine, but no one heard a thing. No cries, no footsteps, just a chilling, unnatural quiet as the unimaginable unfolded upstairs. But what they found instead was a ransom note left on the windowsill. The message, written in broken English, read,
"Dear sir, have $50,000 ready. We warn you for making any ding public."
The demand was simple: hand over $50,000 or else. What seemed like an ordinary sum at the time would now be worth nearly $1 million. The response was immediate and frantic. Charles grabbed a rifle and scoured the grounds, but the trail had already gone cold. Muddy footprints led to a dead end. The homemade ladder lay discarded in the grass, one rung broken, as if the weight of the intruder had been too much. A chisel was found nearby, likely used to pry open the window. Local police were quickly overwhelmed, unable to comprehend the scope of the crime. By morning, the FBI was on the case. J. Edgar Hoover himself vowed to track down the kidnappers and bring them to justice. The kidnapping quickly consumed headlines across America. Radios crackled with updates, and the public was glued to every new detail. The Lindberghs, however, didn't sit idly by in their grief. Charles took control, leading the investigation with the precision and determination of a seasoned pilot, while Anne fought to hold herself together, her composure slipping beneath the weight of the nightmare. The ransom negotiations soon took a strange turn. John F. Condon, a retired school teacher from the Bronx who had followed the case in the newspapers, offered to act as an intermediary. Known as Jafsy, he began communicating with the kidnapper through classified ads in the New York American Journal. The kidnapper initially raised the ransom to $70,000, before settling back at $50,000. On April 2, 1932, in St. Raymond's Cemetery in the Bronx, Condon met with a shadowy figure who spoke with a foreign accent. Charles Lindbergh, waiting nearby in a car, heard the mysterious voice call out, "Hey, doctor." In a wooden box, $50,000 in gold certificates, specially marked and traceable, was exchanged. The kidnapper then provided false directions, claiming they led to a boat where the baby could be found. But it was a cruel deception. There was no boat, and there was no baby. As the weeks dragged on with no sign of the child, hope began to fade. Until May 12th, a truck driver named Orville Wilson, stopping to relieve himself off a road near Mount Rose, about 4.5 miles from the Lindbergh estate, stumbled upon a small, partially buried corpse. The body was badly decomposed, the skull fractured, and animals had disturbed the remains. The coroner confirmed the worst. The child had likely been killed soon after the kidnapping. Outside the Lindbergh home, crowds gathered, some praying, others simply standing in stunned silence, unable to look away. The newspapers printed heart-wrenching stories alongside images of the empty crib, Anne's face twisted with grief, and Charles standing cold and stoic. The investigation unraveled almost as quickly as it began. Hopewell, New Jersey, was never equipped to handle a case of this magnitude, and it showed. Evidence at the Lindbergh estate was tainted, trampled by officers untrained for a crime scene of this scale. Early on, suspicion turned inward to the people closest to the Lindberghs. One name surfaced more than once: Violet Sharp. She was a 28-year-old British maid employed by Anne Lindbergh's wealthy family. Detectives questioned her 3 separate times, and each session grew more intense, more accusatory. A fourth interview was scheduled for June 10, 1932, but it never happened. Before investigators could return, Violet was found dead, cyanide in her system. And to the authorities, it looked like a confession, but it wasn't. Later, her alibi was confirmed. The night of the kidnapping, Violet had been on a date, miles away from the crime scene. Whatever guilt they thought they saw in her was misplaced. Her death wasn't closure. It was the first tragic dead end in a case that would soon become defined by false leads, fatal errors, and irreversible mistakes. The letters didn't stop. One by one they arrived, 7 in total, all postmarked from Brooklyn and nearby neighborhoods. Each carried the same haunting signature and details that only the kidnapper could possibly know. One of them even included a chilling token, the baby's sleeping suit, a grim confirmation that the child was, or at least had been, alive. Authorities clung to these notes. They were more than just communication. They were the only connection to whoever had taken the Lindbergh baby. Then came the money. The ransom had been paid in marked bills, mostly gold certificates. And soon, those bills began to resurface. The marked gold certificates began circulating across New York. Gas stations, shops, banks. The FBI followed the trail painstakingly, hoping that somewhere in this flood of small transactions was a pattern, a name, a mistake. But days turned into months, months into years, and still nothing. The notes had gone silent, and the case, despite its national spotlight, was slipping into shadows. Until September 18, 1934. In Manhattan, a bank teller named Walter Lyle noticed something strange. A man trying to pass a $10 gold certificate. Something about him felt off. So, Lyle took down the license plate, 4U13414NY. It led police straight to Bruno Richard Hauptmann, a 34-year-old German immigrant living quietly in the Bronx with his wife and child. The next day, September 19th, police raided Hauptmann's home. What they found was damning. $13,760 in ransom money, hidden in his garage. Some bills were stored in envelopes, others concealed in hollowed-out wooden beams he had carved himself. Hauptmann had an explanation. He said the money wasn't his. It belonged to a friend, Isidor Fish, a fur trader who had died in Germany earlier that year. According to Hauptmann, Fish left the money in a shoebox and never came back for it. So, he kept it. That story, like much of the case, didn't sit right. The evidence was stacking up. 8 handwriting experts tore through the ransom notes, comparing every curve, every misspelling. Phrases like "any ding" stood out, matching Hauptmann's odd writing style almost too well. Then came the wood. Arthur Kohler, a specialist in lumber, traced the latter's pine to a Bronx yard Hauptmann was known to visit. One plank, a perfect match to a missing floorboard in Hauptmann's attic. Same grain, same knots. The ladder's rail had even been shaved down with a tool found on Hauptmann's own workbench. Piece by piece, the noose tightened. Still, there were cracks in the case, big ones. No fingerprints. Not a single witness who could place Hauptmann in Hopewell that night. The ransom notes? Linked by handwriting but circumstantial. And the money? If Hauptmann really kidnapped and murdered the Lindbergh baby, why keep only $14,000 of the $50,000 ransom? Why stash it in your garage and just sit on it for 2 years? His past didn't help. In 1923, he'd fled Germany after a robbery conviction, slipping into the US as a stowaway. A carpenter by trade, unemployed since the Depression. To police, it fit the profile. His wife claimed he was home that night, but she had no way to prove it. Police interrogation was intense. During interrogation, Hauptmann was allegedly beaten, physically coerced. Still, he never confessed. But outside the station, the court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict. Baby killer caught. That was the headline splashed across every major paper in the country before he even saw a courtroom. Reporters swarmed his Bronx apartment. Cameras flashed. Anna cried. And Bruno Hauptmann was led away in handcuffs into the spotlight. January 2nd, 1935. The trial began. Flemington, New Jersey, once a quiet farm town, was overrun. Nearly 60,000 people poured in. Locals, tourists, reporters, even celebrities like Jack Benny and Ginger Rogers. All just to catch a glimpse of what was quickly being called the trial of the century. The prosecution leaned on handwriting experts, wood analysis of the ladder, and the $14,000 in ransom money found in his garage. But there were no fingerprints, no witnesses, and plenty of doubt. Still, after 5 weeks of testimony, the outcome felt inevitable. Guilty, first-degree murder. Hauptmann was sentenced to death. Appeals followed. New Jersey's governor even launched a separate investigation, suggesting Hauptmann couldn't have acted alone. But the courts didn't budge. On April 3, 1936, Hauptmann walked to the electric chair. He refused a final meal, said a prayer, and with his final breath, claimed, "I am innocent." At 8:44 p.m., the switch was thrown. Charles Lindbergh never showed up. The case was closed. But the doubts never really died. Over the years, historians and legal experts have torn into the evidence that sent Hauptmann to the chair. The ladder wood? Compelling, yes, but not exclusive. That lumberyard sold planks to hundreds of carpenters in the Bronx. The handwriting analysis? Not unanimous. Some experts were uncertain, others flat out disagreed. And the ransom money, the most damning piece, raises its own questions. If Hauptmann really took the full $50,000, why spend it so slowly, over 2 years, and never flee? It doesn't track. The crime itself never felt like a longman job. A lone kidnapper, carrying a 15-foot ladder, scaling a fragile structure, lifting a 30-pound child, and vanishing without a sound? It stretches belief. The broken rung on the ladder even hinted at more than one person. Too much weight for one man alone. Governor Hauptmann thought so too. In 1936, he publicly questioned the lone wolf theory, pointing to the ransom notes, the cemetery exchange, and the body disposal, a level of planning that felt organized. But once Hauptmann was caught, the investigation narrowed, too quickly. Other leads, suspicious men spotted near the Lindbergh estate, whispers of mob connections, even possible inside help, were quietly dropped. And then there's Violet Sharp, the maid who took her own life before a 4th police interrogation. Her alibi was confirmed, but the questions around her still linger. The pressure on investigators was suffocating. The FBI, the press, the public. Everyone wanted a name, a face, swift justice. But when justice is rushed, mistakes happen, and some of them are irreversible. Even at the time, there were voices of doubt. The New York Daily News published pieces questioning the trial's speed and its fairness. Governor Hauptmann's own investigation uncovered overlooked evidence. One witness, Millard Whited, claimed he saw a man lurking near the Lindbergh estate, but police didn't bother to properly interview him until it was too late. From the beginning, the case was chaos. Leads vanished. Logs went missing, and once the ransom money showed up in Hauptmann's garage, the investigation collapsed into tunnel vision. Other suspects, mob ties, disgruntled employees, strange men on the property, all faded into the background. But maybe that's the point. The Lindberghs were American royalty. The world demanded closure. And Hauptmann, a German immigrant, an ex-con, in xenophobic Depression-era America, was exactly the kind of man they could point to and say, "There, that's your monster." The trial wasn't just dramatic, it was tainted. Jurors received death threats. One came home to find a brick through her window. The message was clear: deliver a guilty verdict or else. But the press didn't wait for a verdict. They declared Hauptmann guilty the moment he was arrested. And his lawyer, Edward Riley, rumored to be drunk during parts of the trial, unprepared, and clearly past his prime. It was less a defense and more a performance. Of all the theories that emerged, none are more unsettling than the ones that point inward, specifically toward Charles Lindbergh himself. At first, it sounds absurd. America's golden boy, the heroic aviator, the grieving father, orchestrating his own son's disappearance? But peel back the layers, and some things don't quite sit right. Lindbergh was a vocal supporter of eugenics and social Darwinism. philosophies that place disturbing value on physical perfection, and his son, Charles Jr., reportedly suffered from rickets, had an enlarged head, and struggled with motor development. To some, that clash between ideology and reality raises dark possibilities. Then there's Lindbergh's behavior. He was home the night of the kidnapping, a rare break from his normal Tuesday schedule. He told Anne and the maid not to check on the baby after 7:30 p.m., breaking their nightly routine. The nursery window was open, shutters unlatched, on a freezing March night. When the police got involved, Lindbergh took control. He sidelined the FBI, chose which leads to pursue, and personally handled negotiations. At the ransom exchange, he remained eerily calm, even when standing just yards from the voice claiming to hold his son. And when the baby's body was found, he identified it quickly, without hesitation, then turned and walked away while Anne collapsed in the grass behind him. There's no smoking gun, but when it comes to the Lindbergh case, there might be more buried beneath the surface than anyone ever expected. During the trial, Lindbergh showed almost no emotion. He sat still, staring down Hauptmann. No visible anger, no grief, just silence. After the conviction, he made a curious move. He pushed for the baby's body to be cremated immediately, removing any chance of a second autopsy. A final layer of certainty, sealed in ash. Then, he disappeared. Lindbergh left the country not long after the trial, resettling in Europe, far from the press, the public, and the country that once worshipped him. But that's not where the story ends. In the decades that followed, it was revealed that Lindbergh secretly fathered 7 children with 3 different German women, a double life hidden from even his American family. Not illegal, but it paints a picture of a man willing to bend or break the rules of convention. Most historians dismiss these theories as speculative at best. Grief manifests in strange ways, and Lindbergh's cold composure, his need for control, could have just been Lindbergh being Lindbergh. But even if he wasn't directly involved, what if someone close to him was? The latter wasn't found out in the woods. It was inside the estate walls, a detail suggesting intimate knowledge of the property's layout. Someone who knew when the baby would be alone. Someone who knew exactly where to go and how to disappear. The inside job theory hasn't gone away. And maybe that's because, despite all the headlines, all the courtroom drama, all the years, something about this case still feels unfinished. Without DNA, without a confession, without new witnesses, the full truth about the Lindbergh kidnapping may never be known. Was Bruno Hauptmann truly guilty, or just a convenient fall guy, the face that fit the fear? Was it a one-man job, or something far more complex, something orchestrated from the inside, maybe even with Lindbergh's knowledge, or blind trust? Nearly a century later, the case remains unsolved in spirit, if not in verdict. And the questions it leaves behind, they echo through time. A missing child, a botched investigation, and a nation still haunted by the possibility that the truth was buried long ago, beneath headlines, grief, and silence. The Lindbergh case didn't just shock the country, it changed it. In response, Congress passed the Federal Kidnapping Act, better known as the Lindbergh Law, giving the federal government authority in abduction cases. The way the press covered crimes involving children shifted, and the FBI grew from a fledgling agency into a national law enforcement power. But even with those changes, the case left behind more questions than answers. Was Bruno Hauptmann the lone culprit, or just the easiest person to blame? Nearly a century later, we're still sorting through the pieces, still trying to understand how a crime like this could happen in plain sight, and how quickly certainty can dissolve under pressure.